Howdy. This is the Views from the Schott podcast. I'm your host, your one and only host, Tim Miller, and today it is Wednesday, October 30th, 2024, and I wish you a very, very, very happy Haunted Refrigerator Night. Today's show is, as always, presented exclusively by College Basketball Analytics. You can go to cbbanalytics.com right now, sign up for a free account, and get access to some stats that Division I men's and women's college basketball programs use to scout, self-scout, and prepare and game plan for upcoming opponents. And if you sign up for a paid account, well, then you'll have access to all the stats they have access to as well. So we thank CBB Analytics for sponsoring today's show and the Views from the Schott podcast for this upcoming season. Alrighty, Adam Jardy, the one and the only Adam Jardy, is joining today's Views from the Schott podcast 2024 season preview series episode, where today we're going to cover our biggest questions, biggest changes we expect, and concerns that we have in regards to Ohio State men's basketball for the upcoming season. I'm assuming that if you're following the Views from the Schott podcast on Twitter, or if you listen to the show, you probably know who Adam Jardy is. He is the one and the only. He is, in my opinion, the best reporter coverage, he is the best in the business when it comes to covering the Ohio State men's basketball team. You can find him on Twitter at Adam Jardy. You can find everything that he's writing at dispatch.com. You can find him on TikTok and on Instagram as well. And of course, his podcast, the Buckeye Extra Basketball Podcast. You can find that wherever you listen to podcasts. So today's going to be, in my eyes, an engaging conversation. I think that you will enjoy it. I would, of course, encourage you, if you're new, this is, again, the only Ohio State men's basketball exclusive podcast that is regularly scheduled and publishing content year-round, at least once a week, even in the off-season. So I would encourage you to subscribe. That way, the show is there for you should you choose to listen. You can subscribe on YouTube as well. If you're watching on YouTube, please do like the video and even hit that bell, as other YouTubers say, to make sure you're notified when new episodes come out. On Friday, it's a big show. We're going to predict the Ohio State men's basketball season. And not just that, we're going to predict the Big Ten, Final Four, national champion. All of those types of things will be predicted as well. So it's our big time prediction show before, on Sunday, we will be live on YouTube, the first ever live show of the Views from the Schott podcast on YouTube. We'll be going live on Sunday evening to preview Ohio State's matchup with Texas ahead of that game tipping off around 10 o'clock Eastern. Enjoy on Monday to start off the college basketball season. Alrighty. Let's get into the conversation with Adam. Appreciate you listening today. And again, do subscribe, not just to the Views from the Schott podcast, but also make sure you're listening to the Buckeye Extra Basketball Podcast. Subscribe there. Follow Adam where he plugs his stuff here in just a couple of minutes. It is the one, the only, the Adam Jardy, the beat writer extraordinaire for Ohio State basketball, joining us today for the Views from the Schott podcast 2024 season preview series. Adam, we are mere days away from the season beginning. So what's top of mind for you? Is it just ensuring that you're getting enough sleep before the season starts? Are you anxiously awaiting game one? What's going on in the brain of yours?
Yeah, it's a little bit of all of that. Honestly, it's like trying to appreciate the fact that I have time in the afternoons to like go out and play catch with my son, or do this with my other, like just be present for my family. And also like the feeling of, I still feel like I have 100 things I still want to write from Big Ten Media Day and Ohio State Media Day. So I'm trying to clear out the notebook because a lot of that stuff expires once the season starts. And then also trying to get some rest. It's like can't be up till 2 a.m. during the preseason because there's plenty of those nights coming. So it's a weird, good feeling to at this point of the calendar where you're gonna have real things to write about and talk about real soon, and you just kind of striking that balance of how busy to be right now.
Yep. Yep, 100% get that. You are one of the few who travel to every single game, I believe, or at least the majority of games last year, especially. So definitely appreciate your work. And let's just kick it off with plug all your stuff, whatever you want to share and brag about. Do that now so that those who are listening know where to find you. Although I would assume about 100% already know where to find you.
Well, you can find all my stuff at dispatch.com. I'm on Twitter at Adam Jardy. I'm on Instagram at hoops_and_scoops, which is a name I probably need to change because it's really obnoxious to say out loud. And I'm also posting stuff to TikTok, not anything that you would associate with TikTok, just like videos and interview clips and things like that. But that's at CD Adam Jardy.
Okay.
So I'm trying to find all the readers and listeners everywhere they are, and have my Buckeye Extra podcast that you can find on Apple and all those places.
Yep. Definitely encourage a listen on the Buckeye Extra podcast. And thank you, Adam, for not contributing to the TikTok brain rot. Let's get into the topic today, which we're going to go through just kind of rapid fire here. What are some changes you expect? What are some concerns you have about Ohio State basketball? And what are some questions you have about Ohio State basketball? We'll just kind of get into a few that we've got and talk amongst ourselves. So, Adam, I'll let you kick it off, for you are the guest. What's top of mind for you when it comes to changes, concerns, questions for Ohio State basketball this upcoming season?
I just want to see what it looks like right now. Like I feel like there are so many unknowns with what this roster is, with what this coaching staff can do, with what reasonable expectations are. I don't even know that we really firmly know what half these guys in this roster can do. I mean, you really go down the list and we think we know, and we've talked to them and we've analyzed them, we've written about them, but like is can Sean Stewart shoot threes? I don't know. Can Aaron Bradshaw play on the perimeter? I don't know. Can uh can John Mobley's 3-point shot translate to this level? Can he get it off consistently against high level competition? I don't know. I feel like that's what's really fun right now about this part of the preseason is there's still a lot of like we're gonna find out so much in just a couple of days, and then like that's why I know that the fans don't always love like the non-conference games against Merrimack and Central Michigan and whatever, and the attendance has reflected that, and I certainly get all that, but I enjoy like these early season games where you start to see who can actually do what because um, I have way more questions right now than I have answers in this team, and really that doesn't answer your question super well, but I just think it's kind of wide open what this team is, what it can be, um, and that's why I'm so excited to see the season get started because I'm excited for some answers.
Yeah, so it's interesting you mentioned that. So on Monday's show, I did a mailbag. One of the questions was, when will I feel like I have a good handle on what this team is? And I went back to
Mm,
last season where fans were saying Ohio State should be ranked in at the end of December. This was a team that was, again, a stat that I feel very strongly about. No one cared about. They were the only team in the nation at one point to have 7 wins in a row of 10 points or more. No other team in the nation had that, but Ohio State did at one point through November and into December. Of course, you have that hiccup, more than hiccup, against Penn State.
mm,
And, you take out UCLA and you close the calendar year. And this was a team that I think was maybe 11-3 or something like that. They were very, very, very good at
mm.
that point. And we went into conference play saying, rank this team. Why is this team not ranked? And we had no idea what was coming for us. So for you, Adam, is there a point in the year where you'd say, yeah, I feel like we'll have a good handle of Ohio State basketball? Or do you think it's going to be heading into January? We're still trying to figure some things out.
I think it's going to be probably January. I mean, we'll have a bit of an idea, but I mean, bringing up that's another thing with a new coaching staff and a new regime. Like, do the struggles of the past couple of years follow this team through? I don't know. I'm inclined to say no because it's a new everything right now. But I thought that we knew some stuff about this team last season when they, like you said, I mean, they were 11-2. I got the Ken Palm page up right now. They're 11-2 after they beat West Virginia in Cleveland, and that was an ugly game. They
Mm-hmm.
should have won that game by more, but they won it in overtime, and then they beat Rutgers at home in the Big Ten opener. And you're talking about a team that's 12-2, and I thought we knew some things about this team. I thought we knew that they'd beaten Alabama very convincingly, and took care of Minnesota, ground out that win against UCLA, beat West Virginia, beat Rutgers. Like, I felt like we kind of knew that, okay, this team might have a little bit more stuff than the team before it. Although the Penn State loss certainly was a major alarm bell there. Um, so I hesitate to say that we'll know a whole lot about who this team is until they get into the thick of Big Ten play and really start figuring out what it's going to take to compete in the league. So I'm inclined to say it's going to be maybe mid January before we really know. But they make no doubt, like, or make no mistake, like, they're going to be tested early. And I think, like, playing two top 25 teams in the first week of the season, like, that'll at least give us an idea, I think, on maybe some of the intangible stuff, the physicality, the pace, the toughness, like those kinds of things.
Yeah, so the schedule is one thing. You've got Texas, Texas A&M, Pitt, Kentucky, Auburn, a bunch of really, really good non-conference games, mostly all the way from the Schott, but there's still going to be a big test for Ohio State. So, what's your take on the schedule? Do you think it's too much? Do you think it's too difficult to start, given that it's a brand new coaching staff? Most rosters at this point in college basketball are brand new, but it's still brand new for Ohio State. And now you've got to go play Texas. Then a week after, you got to go play A&M and so on and so forth. So do you think this is too much, a great test? Is it going to be a way for fans to tune out early? How do you view the schedule?
I mean, if, from a fan standpoint, you'd like at least one of these more high major games to be at home. I mean, I know Pitt. I think Pitt's actually going to be pretty good this year, and that could be a really entertaining, big deal type of game. But I know that doesn't sell a lot of tickets right now. And when you talk about some of the teams that they're playing, and they're all neutral or road games, like, that's tough for the fans. And so I feel from them in that regard, and I think that does hurt a little bit as far as, like, if this team wins some of these big games, and if they're playing themselves in the top 25 here by the end of November, and the fans aren't going to have opportunities to go see them at home. That hurts the attendance, that hurts the atmosphere, that hurts all that stuff. So from that regard, I find it a little bit lacking, because you'd like to have maybe one more of these games in Columbus. But having said that, I don't see the downside to this. And I feel like if you're building an NCAA tournament resume, Tom Izzo does it every year. He tests the crap out of his team in the early going, and they will take lumps and they will get exposed in some ways, and then uh, they figure it out. And there's certainly a number of reasons that Michigan State always makes the NCAA tournament, but that's among them. They test themselves early. They don't have a false sense of who they are as the season goes on. And also, those wins or those losses don't necessarily kill your NCAA tournament resume. Like, we're not going to be talking about Ohio State going into Big Ten play and already impossible to get in the NCAA tournament. Like, Big Ten is going to provide, like, quad one, quad two games all season long. It just is. That's how the numbers shake out. And so, if you're playing in a league that gives you the opportunities that you have, or that Ohio State will have to build a tournament resume, yeah, you play these games. And then at the end of the day, if you're talking about a 10-10 Big Ten record, but you also have two high major wins on neutral courts, or maybe you win at Texas A&M, like, that puts you in a really good spot. So um, I admire the aggressive scheduling, and I'm excited to see what it shows, because it will teach us more than if they were playing just 12 cupcakes.
Yeah, exactly. And schedule aside, there's going to be a lot of newness about this team from the top, with Jake Keebler taking over the roster, a whole bunch of turnover there. So Adam, if you've got one major change on your mind from last season to this season, what would that be?
As far as, like, a change I'd like to see them make.
A change that you would expect to see. Like, how is this team going
Oh,
to
okay.
look different?
Um, I think the pace thing is real. I think they've been really uh they've been upfront and very vocal about that very early on, that they want to play faster. They understand they need to play faster. It's been if there's been a lot of frustrations the last couple of years, certainly, and I think high, or like maybe driving a lot of those frustrations, just the fact that this team would dribble the air out of the basketball, and the offense would stick, and you're trying to, yeah, go against a set Big Ten defense for 75% of a game, and that makes for less exciting basketball, and it makes it harder to win. So I do think there's been a renewed emphasis on that, and I'm curious to see how sustainable that is and what that looks like. I think they're a little bit more equipped to play that way than they have been in the past. I'm also I don't quite know how to quantify this, and I've written about this a few times since the season ended, but they are embracing the challenge of winning titles in a way that I have not heard talked about at Ohio State in a long time. And not that it was never not the goal, but they've been very upfront about making that their priority. Like, we're here to win championships. We need to get Ohio State at the top of the Big Ten, playing deep. And they're not even just saying like get in the tournament, or they're not even just saying like win a game in the tournament. They're saying like we want to win the whole thing. It seems a bit early for that kind of talk, but I think it shows that there's a confidence level and a self belief in this program that, we'll see how that gets tested as the year goes on. But I think that's a change that I think we're going to see play out in a number of fronts this year.
Yeah, and I think that just sets the tone. You see coaches across sports who, when they come in and they simply set the tone of we're going to win games, you can see teams get changed and turned around quickly. I think of the Detroit Lions football, and Dan Campbell came in and he made it very evident that this was going to be a hard working, winning football program, and that's what they've turned into. So if you at least set the tone early on, then you start to help the players believe that they can win on a team. Bruce Thornton, one of the only who have been there for 3 years, maybe the only who's been there for 3 years. I guess Kalen Etzler as well, but these players have not dealt with winning a lot. So sometimes you maybe do need to be told that you can win, and you talk about the pace as well. So that's a huge emphasis that's been talked about this offseason, and we saw it in the transition from Holtman to Diebler last year. Last year under Chris Holtman, Ohio State's pace was 64.8. That's 17th percentile in college basketball. And under Jake Diebler, they shot up to 68.8 on their pace rating, which was 78th percentile in college basketball. That comes from CBB Analytics. So we know that they're going to run up and down the floor more. We know that they're going to fly around more. And we know that Jake Diebler has recruited athletes, not just in the portal, but you go to Amari Bynum last week as guys that he wants on his team. He wants guys who can go up and down the floor and run. So that's a big change that I would point to as well. I think one other thing you can look at is the 3-point shooting. So something that has been talked about a lot, and I think is kind of, there's been a stat that maybe has been looked to or has been swept under the rug, and that's the difference in 3-point shooting between Chris Holtman to Jake Diebler. So I've said all offseason, this team is going to shoot more from deep. It's going to have the ability to shoot more from deep. They want a space. But interestingly enough, not only did their 3-point attempt rate go down under Jake Diebler from Chris Holtman, but just their sheer volume of 3-pointers they attempted also went down from 21 to 19 under Diebler, even with a higher pace. So what's your take on that, Adam? Do you see them still continuing to shoot more this season from deep? Do you think that the personnel allows for that change, or do you think this is something that maybe fans or maybe myself are kind of overestimating at this point?
I think the 3-point shooting might be my biggest question mark about this team, because I think so much of how they can play is going to hinge on whether or not they can shoot. Um, if, for example, I expect Sean Stewart and Aaron Bradshaw to play a lot together. If neither of them develops a consistent perimeter shot, teams are just going to clog the paint against them, and they're not going to be able to be nearly as effective as they need to be. And if teams can clog the paint on them, it's going to make it more difficult for drive and kick threes. They're going to make it more difficult for guys to get rhythm 3-pointers. It's going to help teams set their defenses better, and that's a real concern for me. Because when you look at this roster, I did on at a podcast earlier this week where I have my tech subscribers set in over unders for the season, and we just set a whole bunch of like random things that we take guesses on and look back on it in March and see how big of an idiot I am. But I had somebody set an over under on 3-point percentage at 35%, because last year was like 34.5, I think was where they finished. And so you look at who's going to be playing heavy minutes on this team, and I have this right in front of me. But for their career, Michi's a 32.8% 3-point shooter. Bruce is at 35. Micah Parrish is at 33. Aaron Bradshaw, 28.6. Only took a few last year. Sean Stewart's never attempted one. Quez Glover's at 30.6%. Evan Mahaffey 20.7, and Devin Royal 15%. So you have a lot of guys, and I think that's going to be the bulk of their playing rotation. You have a lot of guys who just have a track record of not being high level 3-point shooters, and Junie Mobley is going to impact that to some degree. I believe that strongly, but um, I have a lot of question marks about whether you can ask 6 or 7 guys to all improve by 5%. Now, if they can, then this whole thing looks different, and that also enables Ohio State to play faster. It shakes up a lot of things offensively, but that's when we talk about things I want to see and things I'm curious about, like how this all looks. Can Sean Stewart shoot a three, and can some of these guys take a step forward and get to a 35-36%, because I think that's going to make everything else work better. But until I see it, I'm still a little bit skeptical that it's going to happen.
Yeah, I talked about 3-point shooting a lot in the backcourt preview that I did. So you mentioned some numbers. Michi Johnson, for example, he's a 32% lifetime shooter. In every single season in college where he's played meaningful minutes, he has shot 32 point something percent from three. So if you're even asking for him to go to 35% this year, if he gets there, all credit to the coaching staff for either tweaking some kind of form in Michi Johnson's shot or giving him the space or crafting plays for him to make shots, but I don't see it from Michi Johnson. You kind of went through some numbers. Quez Glover, he had 1 year at 37%. The rest, he was very pedestrian. Micah
Mhm.
Parrish, he was 30% last year. He's had some better seasons, both at San Diego State and Oakland, but not great. Bruce Thornton, his numbers went down last year in terms of percentage wise, while his attempt numbers went up. So maybe if he doesn't have to shoot as many 3-pointers this year, which I would really doubt that he's going to shoot that many less, maybe those numbers get better. You mentioned Sean Stewart has never taken a 3-pointer. Aaron Bradshaw was below 30% last year. Evan Mahaffey, never going to be a shooter on this team. I mean, you're going like to Colin White. Devin Royal, I don't think he's going to, be a great shooter this year for Ohio State in any meaningful way. So Ivan Nigovan, like who is going to step up and really be the Jamison battle this year? And that's something that I've been curious about. And I think you're looking at Junie Mobley. That's the only player that you can really look at, because last year Ohio State loses Jamison Battle, Scotty Middleton, and Bowen Hardman. Those three players, it's a weird mix, but those three players accounted for 50% of Ohio State's made 3-pointers last season. So who's going to step up and contribute to those made 3-pointers this year? I think the only player you can look at is Junie, and I don't feel really confident anyone else can shoot close to 40%.
So I wrote a story this summer. I went to a shooting camp here in Columbus that Bruce Thornton was like he was helping run it. He was not a counselor, but he was like there and like actually engaged with the kids, like doing drills with the kids and helping them with things. And I talked to him about his role with Michi, and can he shoot better and will he shoot better? And he talked about like the number of shots he will be taking, like instead of like getting his own shot, like him and Michi being able to create for each other, and that's going to result in different types of threes. He talked to me about how because they want to play faster, he's going to be getting different 3-point attempts in the flow of what they want to play. So he had been working on different 3-point shots than what he had in his first 2 years at Ohio State, and it gave me a little bit of confidence that he's going to. I don't know if he's going to be a Jamison battle shooter, but like we've seen some of those droughts with Bruce where it's just a struggle, and I think some of that is just a lot on his shoulders. I mean that guy has carried this team in just about every way possible in the last 2 seasons, and so you're going to have slippage, and you're going to have rough nights in that regard. I'm a little bit. I can't quantify this, and I don't even know why I feel this way, but sometimes to me, when you get a guy in a situation like Michi where he's coming back to a school to like try to write a storybook ending, and he's clearly talented, and for all his shooting numbers, Michi can make big shots, and I think that's like it's hard to quantify that like in his shooting percentage, but I think he will make some big shots for Ohio State this year. And I sort of expect, even though he has shot, like you pointed out, like the same um, from three in the last 3 seasons, I think he's going to shoot a little better just from being back home. Like I don't, maybe that's just the naive optimist in me, but I just feel I feel like that isn't unreasonable to think he's going to tick up a little bit. And I think overall, this team, while it doesn't have a Jamison battle, I think this team has more talent overall, like from top to bottom on the roster than what last year's team did. And that makes me believe if you have more talent, if you're trying to ask me why I think they could be a better 3-point shooting than what we've seen from most of these guys historically, maybe if you have more talent, you get better shots. And maybe instead of like that 3-pointer, there's a guy with his hand in your face, he's a foot away because they had to respect the other four guys on the court a little bit more. I don't know. I could see that having an impact on all this too.
Okay, we had some technical difficulties there. I'm going to finish my thought on Aaron Bradshaw, which is the last part that Adam heard, and then we can move on. So, my thought on Aaron Bradshaw, if he actually can shoot threes, if he can space the floor, obviously that helps with 3-point shooting, but not only that, maybe that then gives cutters and drivers an ability to score inside the 3-point line as well. So, all that said, Adam, so far you have covered literally 3 of the central thoughts that I had. I had 2 more here, but I'm going to let you keep going and see if we continue to be on the same wavelength. What else is on your mind in terms of changes, concerns you've got with the team, questions you've got in regards to Ohio State basketball this year?
Trying to think like other top of mind thoughts. Like I'm just I don't a lot of it kind of just comes back to me that I don't know what the ceiling is and I don't know what the floor is. I just um I could be talked into everything clicks for this team and it all goes off great and we're talking about a deep March run and it's an unbelievable turnaround from one year to the next. But um, I could also see a scenario where the shots don't fall and they're not able to play with the pace that they want in the Big Ten and they struggle. So um, I think there's a little bit more volatility potentially for this team this season. And until like I keep coming back to like I don't know until I see more. And um, I'm I think my other biggest question in general is just the front court because I think we kind of know like what Michi can do. We kind of know what Bruce can do. Probably know what Bruce can do more than anybody in this roster, frankly. I feel pretty confident that Ohio State's backcourt is going to be pretty decent and is going to carry the load a lot. Um, but I could see a really high ceiling for the front court, and then I could see Ohio State really struggle in the post. And I don't know where that's going to land other than, I do believe that history shows that if you have McDonald's All-American 5-star players who are in their second or third or whatever years of college basketball, those guys usually do pretty well. So I've got to believe that there's some pretty good basketball ahead for Sean Stewart, Aaron Bradshaw. But again, we've got to see it, and we just haven't seen it yet.
I would say I think the floor on this team is lower than last year's in the preseason last year. Certainly, we don't expect Ohio State, even the floor this year. I personally don't expect Ohio State to be as bad as it was last year, but the ceiling is definitely higher. I mean, this could be a team that's fighting for some kind of a bye in the Big Ten tournament for sure, I would say. So there's a possibility there. And you mentioned the front court as well. Front court is a question I have. Really, it boils down to defense in the front court. And I've kind of ran through these stats in my front court preview, but I'll go through them again. Aaron Bradshaw had 3 fouls in 4 minutes against Oakland in the NCAA tournament game. He had 4 fouls in 6 minutes against Texas A&M. He had 4 games with 4 fouls, 8 games with 3 fouls. He averaged 5.8 fouls per 40 minutes. Therefore, if he would have played a full game, he wouldn't have been able to finish it. Speaking of players who would have played a full game and not be able to finish it, Devin Royal, 6.7 fouls per 40 minutes last year. And Evan Mahaffey had 2.4 fouls per game as well. So foul trouble is a concern for me in the front court. Defense is a concern for me in the front court as well. Last year we saw Evan Mahaffey guarding Zach Edey. I'm not really sure that you want a 6'6 guy on a 7'4 guy this year against Purdue. So how do you see that? Is that a concern that you've got? And how do you see defense in the front court specifically?
I do see some of those fouling issues maybe working themselves out a little bit because, back in the day, boy, now I feel old. But even when I started on this beat, when you didn't have nearly the roster turnover that you have now, it was pretty across the board. You'd see that freshman to sophomore growth would be substantial, and that you'd have any coach in America would tell you that's where you see the biggest leap from one year to the next is when you have that full first season and that full off season, and then you're ready as a sophomore. That's when guys really can take off. And so, I have to believe that a guy like Aaron Bradshaw, a guy like Devin Royal, who, yeah, did get in too much foul trouble in his playing time there late, but that's stuff that you kind of expect freshmen to do. And you would hope that now, as they are sophomores, that not that that's you snap a finger and it's fixed, but I'm not as worried about that, and especially because with those guys we are talking about somewhat limited sample sizes. So um, you know, knowing that they're going to play significant minutes, maybe that changes some of that approach, and maybe they're just a little bit more mature, they're a little bit better as sophomores. So I'm not as worried about that. Um, Defensively, it's going to be different. I had someone asking me if I thought that uh, Aaron Bradshaw would block more shots this year than Felix Okpara did last year, and I said no. Like, he's not the defender that Felix was. Teams are going to plan for him, but not to the degree that they had to plan for the way that Felix protected the rim. And so I do think you're going to see a drop off in that regard, where it's, yes, they're similar looking from a size and a build standpoint, but they're different. They have different skills when it comes to defending, and Felix is further along defensively than Aaron. So there's going to be some adjustments there for sure. If we are talking about like him getting in consistent foul trouble, that's where you have to wonder, like, how ready is Yvonne? I mean, it's been pretty clear to me that he's passed Austin Parks on the depth chart in the preseason. So I think he's the next man up there. I think you see Sean Stewart as a small ball five. But I do think how this team can defend in the post, and um, what some of this looks like. Like, I asked Jake Diebler at Ohio State Media Day, like, is Aaron Bradshaw big enough to play in the post in the Big Ten for 20 games? I legitimately I don't know. I mean, we'll see. And he did say that he's a little bit heavier than maybe what he's listed as, but like a lot of things in this team, I think it's fair to question that until we see it with our own eyes.
Yeah, and that point with Aaron Bradshaw kind of brings me to my biggest question, I would say, for Ohio State basketball this year. And Jake Diebler wants to zig while everyone zags, or zag while everyone zigs, however you want to say it. He wants to play fast. He doesn't want to play set defenses against Big Ten teams. So Ohio State is going to get tested instantly when they start Big Ten play. They kick off January with Michigan State. They get what should be an easy win against Minnesota. I can say that because I'm not on the team. I'm not. I can overlook Minnesota. They can't, but it's Minnesota. Then you got Oregon, Wisconsin, Indiana, and Purdue. That's January 3rd to January 21st. Undoubtedly the toughest stretch on their schedule this season. And that's going to tell us whose style of play is going to win. Is it going to be Jake Diebler's and other teams are having to run up and down the court with Ohio State? Or are the Purdue's, are the Michigan States, or the Indiana's going to be able to slow down Ohio State and force them to play in the half court? That's the biggest question I have. I don't have an answer for it. Kind of like you said, we have to see it to believe it. We have to see what this team is going to look like. But that is by far my biggest question about this team. And I'm not sure, kind of like you said, we're probably not going to get answers until mid-January, late January.
Yeah, and that's the talking point around the Big Ten forever, is like, can you try to play a different style, or does the way the league historically plays force you to then adapt more to the traditional Big Ten physicality? I wonder if adding the teams that have been added to the league, if that impacts it. And I don't know that I expect some of the new additions to necessarily just like go old school Rutgers and just body people up and play the least attractive basketball but winning basketball. Like, I think there's a possibility that with the league being bigger, that allows for more success for different styles, just because you are playing more teams and you're also playing teams less frequently. So it's not like, okay, well, this team's going to guard us this way and then we have to play him again in a month. Like, there's going to be less of that as well. So maybe some of those things work to Jake Diebler's benefit, as far as trying to play with more pace and more tempo than what we've seen maybe in the last couple of years, because there's just different opponents and different styles and a more wide open league. I think that's a possibility. I'm not sure where I fall on that, but I could see that. I can see that being a possibility. I was just looking; they haven't won it at Minnesota in a while. Going back, I was trying to think
Hmm.
about it. They won at Minnesota. I think it was Holtman's 100th like Big Ten win, and Kyle Young played in that game. But I've seen some stunning losses at the barn in my tenure.
And I think the Minnesota game last year, that was the first game after Purdue, or am I wrong on that?
Yep,
Okay.
it was, and um, yeah, they lost. Boy, they were on Jameson battle from the get go.
Hmm.
Like they were. That was a loud, boisterous. They were ready for his return.
Yeah, and that's a classic letdown spot as well. Minnesota's just weird. It's a time change, which isn't well. It's now very common in the Big Ten, but it wasn't as common. You're playing at 9 p.m. I think that game was a Thursday night, so it's weird. And that's going to be the thing again this year. Is that's something I said in the schedule preview. You cannot overlook Minnesota because you've got Michigan State. You're at Minnesota. You've got Oregon at home. Kind of sandwiched between is Minnesota, so they cannot overlook Minnesota. At the same time, this is a team that their odds to win the Big Ten they're so low it's in a tier of their own compared to everyone else in the Big Ten. So it should be a win. We'll see. Let's close with this, Adam. I believe you picked Ohio State to finish eighth in the Big Ten uh, weeks ago when you did your preseason poll. So are you still there? Are you still picking Ohio State eighth? Has that changed at all for you? And kind of give me your just general expectations for the team this year.
I mean, I thought they would have been better in the Cincinnati exhibition than they were, and obviously not having Aaron Bradshaw that has an impact. I think back to last year when they lost to, I believe it was Clemson in their secret scrimmage. They didn't have Jamison Battle, and they got, it was either Clemson or Wake. It was Clemson, and they got like run off the floor. Like they had a really ugly game, and it really showed like how important Jamison Battle was at that point. Um, so I don't know if I expect the same type of okay, well, Aaron Bradshaw's back, therefore everything is significantly better. But I think there's an impact there. I just thought they'd be better in that Cincinnati game overall. Like some of the things that I think this team values and believes in, they didn't execute super well. I think they answered some of that in their secret scrimmage with OU on Sunday. Um, but I think if I had to vote right now, I maybe would like drop them to ninth. Um, it's just it is this was the most challenging year, not just because the league expanded to 18 teams, but when you're talking about 18 teams and the roster turnover that we have in the sport right now, and just the lack of like really proven known commodities in the Big Ten this season, it was wide open. And I had to set up a pretty intricate like ranking system where I picked a couple of categories that I think are valuable, for winning teams, and then evaluate teams based on that. And I've never had to go that far along. Like normally, like the last 2 years, you start with Purdue, you got them at the top, and you probably have Minnesota at the bottom, or maybe Penn State because they had a new coach or whatever. But I would probably put Ohio State maybe ninth. I don't know who I would bump ahead of them right now, but the difference in this league this year between 5 and 15 might be a coin flip.
Mm-hmm.
So that's I think just more reflection. I thought they would have been better in the Cincinnati game.
Yeah. Yeah, and that seems to be the way it is every year in the Big Ten, where a team could finish anywhere from fifth to 15th. Like you said, you really never know. Obviously, it's the first year with more than 14 teams, but there's just so much mixing and matching that you can do when it comes to slotting teams in. You're predicting it, and it's often very close. It probably takes maybe 12 wins. I think you said that in your last show on Buckeye Extra. 12 wins to win the Big Ten this year feels like it could happen. So it's going to be close. It's not like team 1 to team 9 is going to be separated by 4 games. It's going to be all teams are going to be stacked really close to one another. So it's going to be close in the Big Ten this year for sure.
Yeah, the first I think it was Bart Torvik's website. I think had the first Big Ten projections for the season, and literally 9 of the 18 teams were 10-10, and then
Mm-hmm.
you had 4 teams at the top at 12-8, and then 3 teams in the basement at 8-12. So it's like that is the definition of a pick'em league, really. It's gonna make for some really entertaining I think, high stakes basketball as we move into the season. But I would not want to coach in this league. That's for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, that's for sure. Jake Diebler does, though, so we thank him for
Yeah,
that.
He really does.
We are just days away from starting to find out what the Big Ten is going to look like, and specifically what Ohio State men's basketball is going to look like this season. Adam, appreciate you joining today. Make sure to follow him on the socials. He plugged it already on the show. I'll plug it at the very start of the show as well, but Adam does better. I'll say it. He does better than anyone covering Ohio State basketball. Hand up if you think that. A lot of people probably do. So appreciate you taking the time right before the season starts to join the show, and enjoy the season upcoming. Get lots of sleep in the next few days before the season begins.
Well, thanks for the kind words. They mean a lot. I appreciate it. It's always fun to get to talk about the team and look at the season. And I mean, my family is really tired of hearing me project and talk. So it's always nice to chop it up with someone else. So appreciate you having me.
Yeah, you got it. You're always welcome. Thanks again.